Welcome to Season 3 of the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast, the bi-weekly show that brings you the best of powerlifting in Canada. Our three co-hosts include Ryan Stinn, holder of the highest equipped total in Canada, as well as owner of Unparalleled Training Centre in Moose Jaw, and co-owner of Inner Strength Products, Steve Cassioli, IPF world record holder and medalist, third strongest Canadian classic powerlifter of all time, and owner of Cassioli Strength and Conditioning. Lastly, Avi Silverberg, world bench press medalist, national team coach, and co-owner of MyStrengthBook.com. Today's episode starts right now.
This season of the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast is brought to you by MyStrengthBook.com. MyStrengthBook is a web-based platform for powerlifters to build workouts, plan training programs, and assess training metrics that lead to better performance on the platform. Tracking and analyzing training metrics allow you to uncover key trends and insights on what works for you and the precise variables that lead to greater success. Say goodbye to pen and paper tracking and hard-to-use spreadsheets. Say hello to MyStrengthBook. Sign up now for a free trial at www.mystrengthbook.com.
Hello and welcome back to the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast, Season 3, Episode 4. Fantastic episode. I've wanted to have this guest on for quite some time, and we were able to sit down with Brody Laybolt from Alberta. Love this guy. He was a 2015 national team member. He competed in the World Championships in Finland. He is a multi-time national competitor. He was actually our provincial team coach for the 2015 Alberta team, and it hosts many competitions, meet director. He's very active in the club development scene here in Alberta, has one of the biggest clubs in Alberta, and not only that, he has the strongest club in Alberta for the last 2 years running. So we sit down with Brody Laybolt and absolutely love his perspective, being in the game a long time, and we hear him kind of talk about his early days in the sport, about how he just would go into the gym and PR and bang his head against the wall, and over time has developed, kind of a scientific approach to his training and some of the life circumstances that has led to his sort of training style, that being he works many nights, long shifts, and how he's managed to continue to get stronger over the course of time. So can't wait to play that recording for you. But first, we are going to launch our video series here on this week's podcast. What this is we are asking athletes to post their training videos to our Canadian Powerlifting Podcast Facebook page. And during the 2-week period where we are not recording, we're going to be accepting those videos on our Facebook page. Ryan, Steve, and myself are going to be going through those videos and selecting 3 videos for each episode moving forward to talk a little bit about some technical improvements and some advice to those athletes based on what their lifts look like. So we'll be looking at squat, bench, and deadlift, either competition movements or variations of those movements. And we'll be providing our advice, our coaching advice in terms of how it looks, areas for improvement, suggestions on how to improve, and maybe things that you can try moving forward. So we're excited to launch that, and we are going to do that right now, starting with Matt Goldsmith. Now, Matt was one of our intern coaches on our national team this year down in Texas, and he trains out of a club in Ottawa, OPA member, and he is benching. Now, one of the things, if you're watching us on YouTube, we're going to share the screen right now with you. If you're not watching on YouTube, you can either go to our Facebook page and check out the videos that are submitted, or you can just listen to us verbally talk you through the movements right now. Now, Matt is one of these guys who has a really fantastic setup. He has a very, very nice arch. His feet are really pulled back close to his shoulders. He's able to maintain his body position through the reps, and he's doing 3 reps here. However, one of the things that I notice in Matt's bench press and in a lot of people's bench presses under fatigue is that they aren't able to keep their bar in a very consistent groove or trajectory. So what starts to happen if you have a very angled bar path, what tends to happen under fatigue is that you lose that angled bar path. What tends to happen is after the pause is on your chest, instead of driving up and back off your chest, you're driving straight up and then back. Now, typically, if you are a angled bench presser, you got to keep the bar in that angled groove. If you press it up and forward or straight up off your chest, you're going to lose it in the mid-range every single time. Now, this isn't necessarily a strength issue. It's more so a cueing issue. As you get fatigued, you really need to be thinking about up and back off the chest, up and back off the chest, rather than straight up or out over the stomach, which you lose it every time. One of the reasons why athletes lose trajectory or positioning is because they relax on the chest through the pause. So it's about being a little bit tighter on the chest through the pause and cueing yourself up and back. There you go, Matt. A little bit of advice for you. Thanks for submitting your video. I'm going to turn it over to Steve to talk about, who are you talking about, Steve?
Next, I'm going to be talking about Cam McDermott. He's a 120 plus kilo lifter, and he's just setting up here for a deadlift in competition. And the starting position, everything doesn't look too bad at all. Shoulder positioning, hip positioning looks all right. The thing I see, right, he gets tons of speed off the floor and then he gets stuck at the knee. For a guy his size there, what I would recommend is probably widen his stance a little bit. So his base of support's a little bit too narrow, which probably caused him to his knees cave a little bit there. And it's really hard to activate your glutes or cue them to pull through. So, shoulder positioning looks fine. Hip positioning to start doesn't look bad at all. The only thing I would recommend there, Cam, is widen your stance maybe just a little bit and try that out. It might allow you to cue those glutes and bring them in a little bit closer as you're trying to finish the lift.
And one of the things I actually got from you, Steve, when we were hanging out this summer and we were kind of programming at a coffee shop, and you're like, "Hey, Abby," I'm like, "What?" You're like,
I know what you're gonna say.
Have you ever done banded Romanian deadlifts? I'm like, "Never." And since then, I've probably put it into 4 or 5 athletes programming. So banded Romanian deadlifts looks like it would help target exactly what Steve is talking about, activating the glutes in the lockout. Ryan, what do you got for us, buddy?
I'm going to talk about Derek Liu. It's looks like a third attempt squat from junior privileges maybe. Derek says his hips shoot up and back when he comes out of the hole here. So overall, his position looks really good to me. Good back position, and you see the hips shift back. He doesn't lose his back angle, which I think is really important here. So I think he's doing a good job of keeping tight. It looks just like a simple cueing issue. Could be falling back onto his hamstrings a little more than his quads, but for something like that, I would probably just program in some above parallel pauses. So as you come out of the hole, I'd pause just above and then finish up. So you're just kind of practicing that position, holding that right position out of the hole. Either that or I'd program in some tempo work, just again practicing those positions. Overall, though, because I don't see a technique break. Besides that slight weight balance shift, I wouldn't be too concerned about it. It's probably something you can take care of just with doing some technique, lighter technique work.
So Ryan, when you talk about doing one-stop squats, so you come down into your regular bottom position, you come up, you pause just at about parallel, and then you drive to stand up. What percentages, sets, reps you're looking at for that?
Usually I do two pause squats. So I'd actually do a pause halfway down as well, and then a pause halfway back up. Those I don't do a ton of reps, usually in the 4 to 6 rep range. And it's usually in the 60 to 67%. Really not heavy because you really want to make sure you're hitting those pauses and not just kind of gliding through them. People have a tendency to glide through pauses if it gets too heavy. And then I still want to cue that bounce out of the hole, so I don't want someone to pause in the bottom. I find two people do them, they pause the first pause, then they pause the bottom, they pause again as they come up. So we want to pause, get the bounce, then pause, and then back up, just so you're cueing those positions.
And for somebody who that might be a weakness for, you might even want to start a little bit lower, just to get the movement pattern first, then build intensity. I like that variation. So there you have it. If you want to submit a video, go to our Facebook page and you can post your videos. And over the next 2 weeks, we'll be accepting videos and doing this again in our next episode. So it's been some time since we've sat down and podcasted, and we apologize, but it wasn't because we were being selfish. It was just because we were all traveling, doing different things and competing at different things. So let's talk about that for a second. We mentioned on the last podcast that Steve was heading into I guess you could call it a semi-pro competition because there was some cash prizes available, and that was called the Pronic Invitational. So the top 14 best athletes in BC came together competing on Wilks. And Steve, tell us how you did, man.
Yeah, so I ended up going 9 for 9 for my first time ever, actually. I hit a PR deadlift and total. I didn't really have too many expectations going into this meet. I mean, I was still training hard. But yeah, I really took 1 week off to kind of do a little deload and just, went in, had some fun. But yeah, so I squatted 242.5, 3 kilos under my best, which moved very well. I benched 152.5, 2.5 kilos under my best, but my pecs were actually cramping post squat, so I didn't think I had much more than that in me that day. Went with what I thought I could do, and I did it. And for deadlift, if you guys have been following me on Instagram and stuff, you see I've been experimenting with hook grip, and it definitely paid off. I hit a 5 kilo PR on my deadlift, and it moved really well. And I normally have grip issues, and that did not happen at all. So I think I'm on the right path for my deadlift.
Very cool. And that was actually a PR total for you.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love that you kind of go into the meet with no expectations. You're still kind of training pretty hard. You're just putting on the bar what you think you can do that day in the moment.
Exactly.
Set yourself up for a total PR. That's pretty cool. Ryan was just down in Orlando competing at the IPF World Open Powerlifting Championships, equipped obviously, and let everyone know how you did, the experience, and talk a bit about that.
Well, overall, it went fairly well. That's kind of not true, but that's okay. It went okay. I actually got pretty sick with a head cold before we went down, and then I think the flight down really made that worse. I was pretty out of it for Monday and Tuesday. I was living off NyQuil to sleep at night, and so I never really shook that before I lifted, and I think that kind of led into some issues on the bench. Squat, I got called on depth my first one, repeated it and got it on my second, and then jumped to 385 on my third, which was just what I had missed at North Americans in the summer, and I got that, so it was okay. 5 kilos below my best. I wanted a little more, but take what's there that day. So, and then on bench, I got my opener really easy at 275. Felt great, and then I jumped 287.5 with the intention of trying to get to 300 there. And the second one, it came down and felt pretty good. And I got the press, and it just I just kind of petered out. I gassed out halfway up. I kind of pushed out front on that. And then the third one, I brought it down, and as it sit on my chest, I started blacking out. And right before I got the press command, my thought process was, holy crap, I should get them to take this. I heard the press, and I started pressing it just instinctively. And then it barely got off my chest before I basically just stopped. So I think that came down to the head cold and just not getting a big enough air and being able to hold that pressure as well as I usually can. So live and learn on that one. And then on deadlift, I went in with very little expectations. The week before nationals, or before worlds, sorry, I figured out that I also had to switch to hook grip like Steven. I had to do it for a hip issue, which apparently rotating this arm out is causing some bad hip action. So the last workout before I went, I pulled a few hook grips up to 270 kilos, and nothing hurt. So that was my solution. So I actually opened at 275 at Worlds as a hook grip PR, so it felt pretty good. Jumped 295, and it moved really well. So without really being able to train deadlifts, it still moved pretty well. I jumped to 325 on my third just to try to secure, I think, 8th place instead of 10th place. I just told Jeff and Rhea, who were coaching me, just do whatever you want, basically. I figured I had up to 320, 325 that day, but I just didn't apparently have 325 that day. So I missed that one just above the knees or around the knees. So it was an okay day. Not my best total, not my best performance, but always learning something. Apparently head colds can really mess with your bench shirts, so you should definitely keep that in mind.
I remember in 2013, I was down at the Arnold's, and I had a little bit of a head cold as well going into that meet, maybe a week and a half before. But I was doing an equipped bench down there, and I bombed at that meet, and I bombed because for 3 benches in a row, I kept blacking out under the weight. Sometimes that happens when you're doing equipped bench, and that can really take you for a wild ride for sure. Myself, I have not been traveling so much, but I've been moving. So life has been busy, moving houses, and still trying to keep up with coaching athletes and doing my strength book stuff. So pretty busy on my end here. I will say this, in the next couple of weeks, if you are using my strength book, we are doing a pretty big product release. We're releasing 3 brand new metrics, which will give you essentially the flexibility to slice and dice your metrics in any way that you want to see them. Being able to analyze one lift, being able to analyze RPEs, different intensity ranges. So go check that out. We'll release that in the next couple of weeks. Other than that, we're looking forward to getting back into a regular podcast groove every other week. We're now kind of back in front of our computers. All 3 of us don't have any trips planned, so we are going to every other Thursday. You can expect us to release an episode. This week we recorded with Brody Laybolt, so here we go. Looking forward to this one. You guys ready?
Ready.
We're doing it. Okay, let's roll it.
Ready.
We roll it. This week on the podcast we have Brody Laybolt sitting down with us. We're really excited to have you on the podcast. Brody, lifter from Alberta, Cold Lake to be exact, and we've wanted to have you on the podcast for quite a long time, but we finally got an opportunity to sit down. I know you're busy working, just recently had a son, so thanks for joining us on the podcast, man.
Thanks for having me.
Let's just jump right into it. So there might be a few listeners who don't really know who Brody Laybolt is. You've had a club here in Alberta for quite a long time. I've done a lot of club development. Do you kind of want to just talk about how you got into the sport and then sort of how that passion drove you to starting this fantastic club up in Cold Lake and some of the things that are happening right now?
All right, yeah. So, yeah, I kind of started working out to get better for hockey. That's all it really was. But yeah, towards the end of my junior career there, I started poking around powerlifting sites a little bit, looking at records and stuff. And I think James Bartlett had the deadlift record at the time that I was just getting in. So I was like, I think it was about 305 or something like that. I was like, oh, I could probably give that a run here pretty soon. So started getting a little more serious about it and started asking around, trying to find someone. Then I heard this Cliff Sams. He was posted here through the military. So I got in contact with him and he was all for starting a club with me and all that. So he kind of got us started. He kind of showed up to the first workout there that we had set up and he's like, yeah, do you always squat that high? Like, do you always deadlift with straps? And he was giving me a hard time, but yeah, that's exactly what I needed to get started, because if I would have showed up to my first meet without his help, I would have got laughed off the platform. So that was pretty good. And so from there we got more serious. Like we had Adrian join and Mike Frost. We had a bunch of bigger guys. So it was just out of my garage. So not a lot of space. So we kind of made a cap of 400 Wilks, or not a cap, kind of a qualification standard for joining the club. And that worked fine.
So yeah, so you guys up in Cold Lake, it's a military town. There's a lot of oil and gas stuff happening. So that's kind of really the center and the context for the club, is that you got a lot of military guys coming in. Cliff Sams, who's stationed up there, Adrian Locke, who's stationed up there, and just guys that want to lift, right? And you just kind of open up your garage, bought some equipment, and invited everybody to come down, as long as they had that 400 Wilks, raw Wilks, which is pretty insane. So you already started with quite a high standard.
Yeah, but yeah, just like the space restriction, it wasn't me trying to be a dickhead or anything. Like, I want to grow the sport and all that, but yeah, when you only got a 30 by 20 garage or whatever, you can't really have 20 guys in there at the same time. So, and that's like military guys, that's right. They're super into lifting. That's kind of part of their culture and stuff like that. So that was kind of easy to get going that way. And then after a while, like we started getting some high school kids coming in, and I had to split up workout times and stuff. And like, there's people in and out of my house all the time. Like, I think we were up to like 20 guys, and I was like, this is getting nuts, like Aaron wanted to start trying for kids and stuff. I was like, I got to figure something out, because this isn't really going to work the way it's going right now. So I did that for 3 years or so, just right out of my garage. So half the time I wasn't even in there when people were or home when people were working out in there. It was getting kind of ridiculous. So then we found some rental space really cheap, right? So I was able to kind of expand from there. Like, I kind of softened up on that Wilks rule, obviously, and, let a bunch more people in, and that was good for a little while, but the atmosphere kind of was lost at that point. Like, I liked having it in the garage, and I think it was more close-knit. Like, when we moved out, it got big, and it basically just became a gym where people would go to, you know, just work out. Like it wasn't kind of like set times like we had before. Yeah, I gradually kind of petered off that way. And then when my son was born, I would drive down there, and after being at work for a week, and shit would be all not how I like it, you know, like all messed up, and I'd be cleaning up after 16, 17 people, and then
I think there's
around.
I think there's something to be said about that kind of that close knit atmosphere. I mean, it's something that we struggle with our club, and I'm sure Ryan experienced with his club. It's like it becomes a certain threshold where, you know, there's so many people that you lose that environment. Can you talk about how that environment was important to you? Because I remember like early back in your lifting, like in 2011 and 2012, like you had this awesome YouTube channel. And like it was all about the environment, right? Like it was all about, you know, like just guys coming together at a specific time and just training hard and just, you know, like kind of like a team atmosphere, kind of like, you know, how you would envision like your hockey sort of group. Like you kind of brought that over to powerlifting.
That's absolutely, yeah. Like, yeah, I played hockey my whole life, so I kind of brought that mentality over, and everything for me was about, you know, making each other better, like showing up, being a team guy. Like if a guy if he wasn't showing up for other guys and stuff like that, and kind of being selfish that way, like we wouldn't keep him very long. So in that regard, like we became very close, and we kind of had each other's back that way. And if a guy had a meet coming up, like guys would show up to spot him even if they weren't working out and stuff like that, right? Like that's what it's all about to me. Like if you don't really have that, like there's not too much point of having a club, to be honest. Like that's what it's all about. Like, yeah, just getting better.
What I was gonna say, so is your your club's still together right now, right?
I since my son was born, I got out of that building. I was like, I can't keep cleaning up after all these people. It's, you know, there's a few Saturdays there I'm getting in the single ply gear and I'm squatting, you know, 350, 360 by myself, and I'm like, what the hell am I even bothering for? So yeah, I moved it back to my garage and just kept that close-knit group that's been around since the beginning. You know, like I got Adrian, Jeff, Baker, Chris Hines, Shelly's there. Yeah, that's basically, Mike Brennan. Yeah, he lives out of town, but he'll show up once in a while. And, you know, I like having the boys in from Edmonton, like Willie Lamb and Jason, and they're fun to have around once in a while, but for the most part, yeah, it's just like five of us again. So it's
back to the old days.
Yeah, basically, yeah. It's okay. Like I got the son now and stuff, so it's kind of got to be on my time. So it kind of sucks for the other guys, but for me, it is better. So
you got to be a little bit selfish sometimes, but definitely that tight knit group is. Man, it's something special because it's something we struggle with our club too. Is, you know, how big do we want to grow this thing? Because at some point, you know, you get those guys who you know, just kind of you know, they leech off everybody else, but they don't really help out, and you know, they're not willing to show up kind of on their off days to help with technique work or to spot and load or whatever the case may be. But let's talk a little bit about your training, Brody, because I've followed you over the last, you know, 4 or 5 years or so, and there's definitely a clear, you know, evolution of your training. You know, if you go back and you look at some of your, you know, older YouTube videos when you were, you know, just training in the garage in the early days, it was kind of like, you know, you're banging your head against the wall, like, you know, like, you know, doing these massive lifts and, you know, maybe not as technically perfect sort of thing, but you know, over the last kind of like 4 or 5 years, like there's been a really kind of finesse in your sort of technique, and you know, I know that your training methodology has shifted and evolved. I know you started with kind of sort of RPE style training and moved off of it, and maybe you're back on it. Can you just talk a little bit about sort of that evolution? So go back to like early garage days and then kind of how that's progressed over 4 or 5 years and where you are now.
Okay, yeah. So early garage days, like I could honestly say I didn't really have a complete understanding of what powerlifting really was. Like I thought it was just like being retarded, basically. Like we would just go, like we would go in and go for a PR every friggin' day. Like it was terrible. Like it worked for a while. Like we were getting stronger, but like then the injuries started piling up and stuff. You're like, what the hell am I doing? Like, so then I was like, I got to get some direction, you know, like I'm following these like 5-3-1s and stuff, and I'm not even really following them. Like if it's a 5 day, I'm going for a PR, like, you know, like just, you know how it is. And then, so I was like, yeah, I need some direction. So I started looking around, and yeah, Mike Tessier's name kept popping up. So I was like, yeah, I'll go with him. Like, see, like he was the World Games champion and all that stuff. Like he still is, but at the time he was the man, you know? So, yeah, I go with him, and yeah, he impressed me. Like he knew like his knowledge of everything was just awesome. So I decided to go with him, and yeah, that was great. I think I was with him for about 4 years, and yeah, but I started running into the same kind of problems with the RPE. Like, you know, if it's a 4-day, I had this PR board up in my garage, so I'd be like, okay, it's 4. I'm doing pause squats for sets of 4. So I look up at my PR board and I'm like, okay, what's the best 4 I've ever done? Then I try and beat that. So like for a while that was working. Like I was getting stronger that way. But yeah, then again the injury started piling up. I ended up getting a pretty bad one, SI joint type injury. There was days I couldn't even deadlift a plate. It was miserable. So I was like, yeah, I gotta change it up here. During this time I was still with Mike, and started getting a lot more smarter about my weight selections and training and stuff like that. Started coming around. That was like a year-long ordeal for me to get back to where I was, kind of thing, pre-injury. I just figured, you know what, it's been 4 years. I really like certain aspects of the training, but I kind of wanted to do it on my own. Just being on shift work and stuff like that, I kind of have a better idea of when I'm going to be strong and when's kind of a better time to kind of work on form and stuff like that. Like if I'm deep into a shift, I kind of just learned to know my body a little better over the years. Like I've been on shift work for like 10 years now, so obviously I'm going to be more effective on a day off of work. But
I really like
yeah.
how you're saying how like, you kind of learned during this you learned during this time of 4 or 5 years, training under Mike. And then, at some point you get to know your body in such a way that nobody else, would have that sort of intimate understanding of, like when you go off and, you're working, you're doing night shifts and what should your training, like you're obviously still changing that period, how that looks like the next day or the next couple of days, the next week, so you had this, I do want to talk about your shift work and how you've managed your training around that. But before we do that, can you just talk a little bit more about your training? So you had this injury and then you kind of like, you worked your way back for about a period of a year to kind of a healthier state. And then this is when you transitioned off of kind of a RTS Mike Tashur style training. And then kind of what happened?
Yeah, from there like I said, I wanted to kind of do my own thing just because I knew my body good. And so I kind of went straight percentage because I still, to this day, like I could sit here and talk to you guys and like make it sound like I'm level-headed with training and stuff like that. But if I program myself in RPE, like I'm going to look at that PR board and I'm going to go for it. Like if I'm feeling good, I had to get rid of pre-workout, all that stuff, because if I'm on pre-workout and I'm squatting, I'm like, yeah, I'm feeling good. I'm doing 5s today. Like what's my PR, like, so I had to get rid of my PR board. Like it's gone. And that was a big thing. And I went like for the main lifts, I went on like just straight up block periodization, kind of use percentages from Mike's programming and a little bit that I got from here and there, and then on my variant lifts, I'm still on RPE style training, but yeah, I'm getting better at saving it for the big lifts.
I was going to say, I think that brings up a really strong argument against RP training is that mentality of trying to beat that PR last time, right? Where you did, where your 8 RP on a single was whatever, and this time you want to make it more. And I think it's just it's one of the hardest parts of training RP, and I think you really identified it there. It's interesting how you found that you had to transition back into percentage based to kind of control that drive to push yourself that hard.
Well, I think like certain people, they thrive on that RP style. They have a level head with training and stuff like that. But like, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you guys, but yeah, I had to get off of it just because of that. And another big thing for me was I'm getting into single ply training now. I've been doing it for 7-8 months now, and that kind of quenches my thirst for heavy weights. So I'm not as inclined to go for something stupid raw where like I can hit something pretty heavy in single ply and like feel good about it, and then when I'm training raw, my mindset's more, I'm gonna try and get stronger now instead of just going nuts here.
So now with the equip training there, Brody, do you kind of follow that similar style programming? So are you still doing like the percentage based? Are you kind of using that RPE, and do you find that percentage base has kind of helped you like mitigate some of those injuries, I guess?
Yeah, with I pretty much just ramp it up slowly. I'm really liking. I got it from Blaine Sumner's program there, where he does 3 singles every week. But I'm in camp every second week, so I end up only being in gear like once every 2 weeks, which actually works great for me because like sometimes if I go a little too heavy in the gear, I have problems recovering, like my CNS and stuff. Like I just feel burnt right out. Like I didn't really know what that meant until I got into the gear. Like it's a big change from raw training.
Yeah, so you're still kind of using, you said you're using like Blaine Sumner's program sort of deal. So so hitting that single, so is that single like, is it like a percentage base or kind of just like an RPE base that you were saying there?
Oh yeah, on the 3 singles, like I'll just start slower. So in the beginning of the training cycle, it'll be, I don't really look at it percentage wise that way. I just kind of go off what I want to do at the meet for nationals and then kind of go back, work it back that way. And it's only my second meet in gear, so it's not really down to a science yet for me. But what I'm trying is like I set up a long cycle here. So I did about 6 weeks just beltless raw training and lighter gear training. Now I'm kind of transitioning into an accumulation phase raw. The gear is still relatively light, like under 90% for sure for singles. And then I'm gonna kind of peak out my raw lifts about 8-9 weeks out from nationals, and then from there taper my raw lifts off, and then that's where I'll really start pushing my geared lifts.
I really love that that sort of methodology and the way that you explained it. And I think it's important that when you set up the gear training cycle, I think more so you actually have the time to do it properly. I think that equipped training cycles are probably generally a little bit longer, to get used to, not only the technique and stuff like that, but you don't want to do too much too quickly because it will burn you out, as you said. So I think the longer training cycle between meets is helpful, and you can do kind of maybe back-to-back meets fairly quickly raw, but you can't do it sort of equipped. Is that what you find?
Oh yeah, like I've only done the 1 meet in gear. That was back in provincials in Cold Lake there. I remember I even messaged Stin about it. I was like, what, like, does this always happen after you do a meet like in single play? Like I felt like I thought there was something wrong with me. Like I could barely deadlift 300 kilos. And I was like, what the hell? Like this should be nothing. And then it comes back, but it was like 3-4 weeks later before I actually felt like myself. It was like, yeah, it was unreal. Like you could do a raw meet and like, yeah, you're sore for a couple of days, but within a week you can start pushing it pretty good again. So yeah, I don't know if I'm just getting older or what, but yeah, single ply, that's a whole different ball game. And like you said, with the training, there's so many more variables like you got to worry about. Like the recovery is huge. Like I noticed already, like my raw lifts are all over the place. Even like last week I hit I think it was 350 for 3 singles in the squat suit. The next day I deadlifted raw and it was great. I took a day off, then for like 3 or 4 days after that I was just garbage. So I'm still trying to figure stuff like that out. So I'm definitely far away from being advanced in the gear. So it'll come though. Like,
I love how you're kind of like not beating yourself up about it though. Like I think that's I think that you just your perspective of, you understand that this is going to be a process, and that you're willing to learn about it over the long term. I think a lot of people get frustrated with the process in terms of like, okay, you have 2 good days, but then you have 3 kind of crappy days, and like the majority of training should happen in this kind of like medium sort of zone where you're not feeling too great and you're not feeling too shitty, but like people get discouraged about that when they don't go to the gym and they're feeling 10 out of 10 or 9 out of 10, and they're just kind of going in and it's 5 out of 10 or whatever. Like they kind of get discouraged. But it sounds to me like you're taking it as kind of like learning, in the sense that I'm trying to figure out what works, getting in the gear, how to structure my weekly exercises, and when I do my time your intensities properly so that everything becomes effective. But that takes time to learn what works for your body.
Oh yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
And you're not beating yourself up about it.
Oh no, yeah. You see a lot of the other side too. Like I started getting into coaching a little bit, and you see kind of those guys that they have one bad workout and they're all insecure about it, and you kind of got to be like a counselor to them almost. And it's like, yeah, seeing that kind of side of things like kind of keeps your head a little more level about it. Like when you're having up and down days, like I won't start really worrying about it unless I start, have 1 or 2 bad weeks. Then yeah, I'll be freaking out. But one bad workout, like I could usually figure out why. Like if I push the last couple a little too hard or whatever, but yeah, I'm not gonna freak out about it.
Let's talk about your shift work, because I know a lot of people have irregular schedules. It might not be shift work in the exact same sense that you have, but it might be that they're a student. They have they have to set up their training around a really stressful week, or a week that they don't have a lot of sleep or a lot of time to recover. Those are sorts of life. Those are like life variables that affect training that should be accounted for. So you've kind of developed a system. I mean, like you said, you've done shift work for like the last 10 years. So, what are some kind of takeaways that you can, tell people during these kind of tough times that they're not, or they might be a little bit more stressed out, under recover, things like that? Like, how do you set up your training so that it's still effective? You're still moving that kind of ticker forward and, getting effective training through all that.
Okay. Yeah. So after a certain amount of time, I kind of figured out, like, the first couple days of a shift, like I work 12-hour days and it's an hour and a half drive to site. So I have the option of either staying in camp or driving home each day. So it's either a 15-hour day or it's a 12-hour day. So I'm either getting up at 4 in the morning and getting home at 8:30 at night, and then working out and having to be up at 4 in the morning again. I did that for the first like 7 years or so, and that was miserable. And then, now I'm starting to stay in camp a lot more. So there it's a lot easier. It's only 12 hours. I might be a little bit different than most people, because I'm basically, my job is like Homer Simpson. Like I sit in front of screens and that's operate a plant basically. So it's not like physical labor or anything like that. So, but it does, that much sitting does wear a guy out. So I have figured out, not to expect as much on those days, and it does take a little more to get going. The last couple hours of the day, I'll start, if I have some free time, I'll get up and start, moving around, stretching out a little bit, maybe. Make sure I'm eating throughout the day, so that part's taken care of. And then when I get to the gym, probably takes me an extra 15 minutes to warm up, just from sitting so much, and that's fine. And then, just slower ramp ups on the way up, smaller jumps, take maybe a half plate instead of a full plate on the way up. And then from there, just work up slow. Usually takes me 2 or 3 working sets to get going, but once you're in it, it's not that bad. You just can't expect to be your best self at those points, especially when you're deep into a shift. Just worry about getting work done. Don't worry so much about load on the bar on those days. Just go in and get her done, and know that it's going to pay off on your days off. When you're a lot more rested, you're going to be feeling good. So half the time my training is absolutely optimal. Like I sleep 8-9 hours, well, less now because of the baby, but I get way better sleep. Like I pretty much work out exactly when I'm feeling the best during the day. So there's definitely a contrast there. I can see when I'm feeling shitty, I'm going to be lifting this. When I'm feeling great, it's going to be different. So
just quickly, if we can kind of go back to when you're doing shift work with the RP style training, what kind of difference were you seeing on the load in the bar on, say, like an RP 9 working set? Like, was it like 100-pound difference, 20-pound difference? Like, what kind of differences did you kind of notice when on shift?
I actually had that down right to a science there, Stidler. About 2 RP difference on my last shift. So on 7 night shifts, I'm working 6:30 p.m. to 6:30 a.m. Probably getting to sleep by 7:30 in the morning. Then I'm waking up at 2 to train. The first half of the shift, I'm decent. I'm okay. I'm about 98% of my estimated 1 rep max there. And then the tail end of the shift, it dies off considerably there. Like I'm probably, 92 to 94% of where my max would be on days off, what I'm working off anyway. I noticed, at least a full RP to 2 RP drop. So if something is a 7 RP on day off, it's going to be a 8 or 9 on a 7th night shift. That's kind of how I did it, and I just went into it expecting that. And sometimes it was better, sometimes it was worse, but in that respect, the RP training kind of worked, just because you're not at your best, so you kind of get to see the contrast there.
When you're programming with percentages now, like do you take that into account and try and base those workouts off of a lower percentage, or do you try and just drop those percentages as you
absolutely
go?
So on my days off, that's where my big lifts are. I save all that for when I'm rested, and then the first half of a shift, that's where I'll put my I'll put my biggest squat of the week on the first day of the shift, because I know like squatting heavy deep into a shift is terrible. So I'll get that out of the way first thing, and then deadlift about a couple days later, and then bench. My heaviest bench I get bench tired, no problem. So I kind of set it up that way, and then push the variance towards the end of the week. And there it's just basically working on lifts that don't matter as much, really, like, like pause deadlifts and stuff like that. So I'm not too concerned about bar load there.
Yeah, so staying on the topic of like just programming and stuff like that, we had a question actually come in on our Facebook page. Someone was asking, so like, what are your top 2 or 3 assistant movements for your like squat, bench, and deadlift they prescribe at the end of the week there, like you were saying?
Okay, yeah. So squats, to be honest, I haven't been doing a whole lot of variance, just because like you're in the gear once, then you have to keep up your raw squat too. Basically, that's about it. Like I do some high bar, beltless, and pause squats right now, but that's about the extent of that. And then on bench, I actually got it from this podcast. You guys were saying you did a lot of 2 boards and stuff like that. And I noticed in the past, like my bench would be going great, and then right when I started getting into PR territory, like I'd tweak a pec or something like that, I was just going too heavy, too much to the chest. So I started doing 2 boards like you guys are talking about quite often, and it's carried over to my my equip bench. And yeah, I'm feeling great right now. Like I don't think I have too much risk of tweaking a pec, and my bench is going way up. So that's good there. I've been doing a lot of those. So I'll have a shorted bench, raw bench with a pause, and then I kind of play with like 2-3 count pauses sometimes, and then I'll do a 2 board, and then some kind of just random, like maybe feet up close grip or something that's a little bit easier on the joints for the 4th day. Sometimes I skip the 4th day altogether, because you get pretty banged up benching 4 days a week if you're doing it all the time. So I kind of play that one by ear. If I could do it, I do it. If not, I don't worry about it too much. And for deadlifts, I really love pause deadlifts just off the floor. I think they have great carryover, just because you have to hold that. You have to be patient, and you have to hold that position and be tight off the floor. So that's a big one for me. Like, it kind of reinforces that positioning. And I'll do deficits once in a while. They seem to help with speed off the floor for me. And then just basically straight up deadlifts.
I know you've had some massive kind of pause deadlift numbers. I just from seeing on Instagram and Facebook and all that, like you really have focused on pause deadlifts quite a bit over the years. I just keep hearing, you saying like, you mentioned something, and then you say, well, then I try not to worry about it so much. And, it's just I love hearing that, because I think a lot of people just obsess over like, one training day or one exercise feeling, crappy that day. And, you're just kind of like, well, I don't worry about it. Like if it feels good, if I can do a 4th bench day, I will. If not, like, not a big deal. Like in the long run, it's going to keep me healthy. In the long run, it's not going to be significant to affect my overall strength. It's just doing those necessary modifications, knowing your body and knowing what works for you and knowing what doesn't, just so that you can kind of keep the ball moving forward ever so slowly, right?
Yeah, after you tweak a few packs and stuff like that, and you got to take 2-3 weeks off. Like after 3 or 4 of those, you start to smarten up a little bit. That happened to me right before nationals in 2015, and then I was lucky enough to get to compete on the world team that year. And like I was bullheaded about it. I tried coming back too quick, and then 13 days away from worlds, I did it even worse. So I was like, after that, that kind of disappointment at that time, the biggest meet of your life, and you kind of screw it up being a meathead. You kind of start to learn. So it came a little bit late for me, but that's the way she goes.
Yeah, I want to just kind of jump back into, you just kind of recently got into equipped lifting. And I was kind of curious, because you were probably, at least from my perspective, you and Adrian were 2 of the first, I want to say like really strong raw lifters in the area. I know that there had been raw lifters before you guys, but I remember when you guys came out to, I think it was a Westerns in Moose Jaw.
That Synergy Open 2014. Yeah.
And I just remember looking at you guys, and I think you were open with like a 300 or a 310 deadlift or something like that, and Adrian wasn't far behind, maybe like a 280. And so like you guys were a couple of the first guys that were really, I thought, were a couple excelling at at raw lifting. So it's kind of interesting to me because I've always had this kind of theory that the increase in raw lifting will slowly trickle into equipped lifting as people kind of either catch injuries or kind of get tired of the slow progress of raw. They want to kind of try something new. So I'm just curious what kind of got you experimenting into the equipped side of the stuff?
Mostly like just watching the weights being lifted there is like, that's pretty awesome. Like, and then you see guys like, Adam Ramsey and stuff that are good at both. Like, I have the ultimate respect for guys like that can excel in both sides of the sport. Like, yeah, and I figured, I'm calling myself a powerlifter. I might as well try and experience the whole sport. And yeah, I'm really glad I did. Especially coming off injury with the squat suit, you get a little, I don't know what the right word to use is, overcautious probably. Like when you have a big weight on your back raw after you get hurt, and mentally it's not the same as pre-injury. But yeah, loading 100 150 pounds over your raw max and being successful a few times, like it starts making those raw lifts feel a lot easier, to be honest. Especially squats and bench. Deadlifts, yeah, not too much, but yeah, my bench has definitely improved as a result of training in the shirt, I think. Just because I was always weaker at lockout, and now just holding those kind of weights at lockout has carried over quite a bit. So there's that. So I have goals in both. Like I want to do well in single ply, but yeah, I think Nationals 2018 is going to be pretty wild. So yeah, I look forward to trying to go raw there. So.
Can you talk about some of your goals for next year then? You're going to do you're going to do Nationals equipped and raw, and what are you kind of looking at doing?
Oh, Nationals. So I looked at the schedule, and yeah, unfortunately, raw and equipped is the same day for 120s. So yeah, I'll probably just go equipped for this one, just because that's what I've been kind of focusing on. So I'm not sure. I'm pretty fat right now. I'm like 125, so. We'll see. I'm going to try and get down to 120, but either way, like I got competition in both classes. You got Stidler in the heavies, and then John McDonald, who has like 120 meets in the 120 class. So yeah, it's not any easier, that's for sure. And then so I'll have fun either way. But after that, I think I'm going to focus on raw a little bit. I want to take a run at that 2018 team there, so we'll see how that goes. That's going to be a really, really tough team to make, but if all the ducks line up, I think I got a shot anyway.
Very cool. So just really quickly, before we wrap up, dad strength, is it a thing? Is it not a thing? You've had a son now for a couple months now, so.
Absolutely, it is a thing. I can attest to that. About the first couple weeks after he was born, it's pretty hectic around the house. Like you're trying to get a feel for how it's going to be, and I didn't want to spend as much time in the gym, and I was way far out from a meet, so I just wanted to get in there and get some reps in and get out kind of thing. And yeah, I ended up hitting like 5 PRs the 2 weeks he was born, so I kind of reverted back a little bit there, but in my training methodology, but that was fine. I'm back. I made it out injury free, so now I'm back to having my head straight. But yeah, it's not so bad. Yeah, it's good.
Cool, man. Where can people find you on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube? How can people get in touch with you?
Facebook, it's just Brody Laybolt. Instagram is, you can find me on Brody Laybolt. It's CLBB_Brody.
Very cool. Well, we really appreciate you having on the podcast, Brody. I just love hearing your perspective of how your evolution of your training and some of your mentality and perspective. Highly encourage you to add Brody on Facebook and check him out on Instagram, because some awesome lifting that you're showcasing right now, both raw and equipped, and just hearing your perspectives is great. So thanks for coming on the podcast, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Fun times.
Thanks, Brody. That was good.
Thanks, Brody.
Yeah.
We'd like to thank Father Brody for coming on the podcast. If you want to reach out to him, you can find him on Facebook, or also his Instagram account at Brody Laybolt.
And don't forget, y'all go to our Canadian Powerlifting Podcast Facebook page. Upload your training videos there. We're going to select 3 every other week to talk about on the podcast, and hopefully share with you some of our knowledge. And Ryan, we got a website too, man.
Do we?
We got a website. What's the
that?
website, man?
I think it's still CanadianPowerliftingPodcast.com. We post all of our new episodes there. And a little bit of bonus content still exists there, so if you want to check that out. yeah, go check it out, CanadianPowerliftingPodcast.com.
And that's it. We're going to wrap this up by each recording an animal sound as the outro, our favorite animal sound. Okay, ready? On 3. 1, 2, 3.
It's always going to be caw. It's always the eagle, man.
Caw. It's the caw.
All right. Peace out.
All right, peace.
You've been listening to the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast, the podcast that brings you the best of powerlifting in Canada, hosted by Stephen Cassioli, Ryan Stinn, and myself, Avi Silverberg. Please follow us on Instagram and check out our website for some great free powerlifting content at www.canadianpowerliftingpodcast.com. If you like what you heard today, please rate our podcast on iTunes and don't forget to listen to every other Thursday for a brand new episode.